She called the cops and screamed, "Arrest him. He's trespassing." But the funny thing was, I was standing on my own land. The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the brand new white fences, the ones they had built right through my property line. I watched as 2 officers stepped out, confused, looking from me to the woman in the floral blouse waving papers in the air. "That's him," she shouted again. "He doesn't belong here. This is Hoa property." I just smiled. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "you might want to check those papers again." Her name was Linda, president of the new Willow Creek Hoa. The kind who thought a clipboard made her queen. She'd built an entire neighborhood on what she thought was her land. 96 homes, fences, mailboxes, street signs, everything. But she never checked who actually owned the dirt underneath it all. For months, I'd watched construction trucks come and go. I could have stopped them. I could have yelled, called the county, or hired lawyers. But instead, I just let them build. Every house, every driveway, every picket fence, right on top of my acres. When I tried to tell one of the workers once, he laughed. "Man, this whole area's bought out. You're late to the party." I just nodded. "Yeah," I said, "we'll see." Now, standing there while Linda barked orders at the cops like she was running the government, I could feel the moment finally coming. I'd waited for this. Every arrogant word she threw at me was fuel. The officer turned to me. "Sir, do you have any proof this land's yours?" I reached into my bag, slow and steady, and pulled out a worn brown folder. The edges were creased, the paper yellowed, but the signature was clear. County seal, my grandfather's name, the last deed before the city expanded. I handed it over and said quietly, "Yeah, I think this will do." Linda froze. Her face changed like she'd seen a ghost. The cop looked down, then back up at me. "Sir, this says you own all of Willow Creek." I nodded. "That's right, every inch they built on." And right then, you could feel the air shift. The cops looked at each other. Linda's hand trembled, still clutching her fake Hoa notice. She whispered, almost to herself, "That's not possible." But it was. And that was just the beginning. Viral line, they built their dream neighborhood on my land, and I let them. 10:15, 10:39 a.m. Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf. Linda didn't take long to bounce back from shock. The very next morning, she showed up at my gate with 3 men in suits and a smirk that could cut steel. She didn't even knock, just yelled, "You have 1 day to move your junk off our property." I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, calm as a still lake. "You sure you wanna play that game, Linda?" I asked. One of the men stepped forward, clearly a lawyer, or trying to look like one. "Mr. Hayes, our records show this land was transferred to Willow Creek Development 3 years ago. You have no claim." I didn't argue. I just motioned to the old oak tree near the driveway. "See that metal post under the roots?" I said. "That's the original county marker from 1964. You might wanna bring your surveyor before you start claiming things." Linda laughed that fake, confident laugh. "Oh please, we've got permits, deeds, and signatures. You're just some old man trying to get a payday." I didn't answer. I just smiled again and said, "If I was after money, I'd have stopped you months ago." Her smirk cracked for a second. Then she pointed at me like a dictator giving orders. "Fine, I'll handle this my way." And she did. That evening, I got a knock on my door. 2 men in black jackets, flashing what looked like badges. "Sir, we need you to vacate the premises immediately." Hoa complaint. "You're trespassing." Fake cops. I could tell, instantly. Wrong badges, no name tags. I played along. "Sure thing, officers. Just one question, do you mind if I record this?" They froze. The taller one stammered, "That's not necessary." "Oh, I think it is," I said, pulling out my phone. "Because see, I was a sheriff here 15 years ago. I know what a real badge looks like." Their faces drained of color. One muttered, "We're leaving," and they bolted down the steps before I could even blink. Linda must have thought she could scare me off. But she didn't know who she was messing with. I wasn't just some old man. I was the guy who trained half the county's law enforcement before retiring. And I had every piece of paper to prove that the land, her entire precious neighborhood, was mine. Still, I let her think she had the upper hand. Let her dig her own hole. Because when the day came to face her in court, I wanted the judge to see the truth unfold, slow and painful. Viral line, she sent fake cops to evict me, but she forgot I used to train the real ones. 10:15, 10:40 a.m. Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf. A week later, I got the letter, big, fancy envelope with the Hoa logo stamped in gold. Notice of trespass and land encroachment. It looked official, but I could smell the arrogance from a mile away. I sat at my kitchen table, read it twice, and actually laughed out loud. They were suing me for living on my own land. I showed up at court on the day of the hearing wearing my old denim jacket, the same one I used when I worked patrol years ago. No lawyer, no fancy briefcase. Just me and that same brown folder with the original deed. Linda was already there, sitting in the front row like she owned the place, whispering to her attorney. She spotted me and smirked. "Hope you brought a good lawyer, old man," she said. I leaned closer and whispered back, "Don't need one when the truth's on my side." When the judge walked in, Linda's attorney jumped up, full of energy. "Your Honor, this man refuses to vacate Hoa property. He's been trespassing, harassing residents, and making false ownership claims." He spread out blueprints on the table, showing the homes, the park, even the new playground. "All of this," he said, "belongs to Willow Creek." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Hayes, do you have anything to say?" I stood up slow, feeling every eye in the courtroom watching. "Just one thing, Your Honor." I opened my folder, pulled out the faded deed, and placed it on the bench. Before they poured a single foundation, this land was mine. It still is. The judge frowned, picked it up, and started reading. The courtroom got so quiet, you could hear the clock ticking. He looked at the paper for a long time, then turned to Linda's lawyer. "You said this land was purchased 3 years ago." "Yes, Your Honor, by Willow Creek Development." The judge nodded slowly, then explained to me why the county record still lists Mr. Hayes as the legal owner. Linda's face went pale. Her lawyer froze. You could see the gears turning in his head. He realized something had gone very, very wrong. I didn't say a word. I just crossed my arms and waited. The judge set the deed down and looked straight at Linda. "Ma'am, unless you can prove otherwise, it seems your Hoa has been operating on land that doesn't belong to you." Her jaw dropped. "That's impossible. We've built homes, we pay taxes." The judge raised his hand. "Paying taxes doesn't make it yours, ma'am. Ownership does." And in that single moment, the entire courtroom felt it, the power shift. Viral line: "They sued me for trespassing on my own land, and ended up proving I owned theirs." 10:15, 10:41 a.m. Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf. Linda didn't walk out of that courtroom defeated, she walked out furious. The moment the judge dismissed the case, she pointed at me and hissed, "This isn't over." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from pride snapping in half. I just tipped my hat and said, "Didn't think it was." 2 days later, my phone started ringing non-stop. Unknown numbers, angry voices, threats. Someone had posted my address in the Hoa's Facebook group, calling me a squatter and criminal. Residents who'd never met me were sending messages like, "You're ruining our community." One woman even drove by my house yelling from her car window, "We'll get you out." I didn't react. I'd seen worse in my time as sheriff. But when I saw a group of men tearing down my private property signs near the road, I knew Linda had crossed another line. That evening, I installed my cameras, real ones, with audio and motion sensors. Then I sat on the porch and waited. Sure enough, around midnight, I heard footsteps. 2 men with flashlights were sneaking near my barn, whispering. One of them said, "She said it's fine. We're just moving the boundary back where it belongs." I stepped out of the shadows and clicked on my own flashlight. "That's far enough," I said, voice low and steady. They froze. "Tell Linda next time she sends someone to trespass, she might want to check whose land they're standing on." They ran like scared deer. Next morning, I drove straight to the sheriff's office, my old office. The new sheriff, Mike, recognized me right away. "Heard you've got trouble down by Willow Creek," he said, shaking his head. "That woman's been calling here non-stop trying to file complaints on you." I showed him the footage from the night before. He watched it in silence, then leaned back and whistled. "Looks like she's the one trespassing now." He filed a report right there. "We'll handle it," he promised. When word got back to Linda that I'd gone to law enforcement, she lost it. She started calling emergency meetings, trying to rally the homeowners. "We can't let him take everything," she shouted during one of them. But some of the residents had already started asking questions. "Wait," one man said, "if he owns the land, what happens to our homes?" That's when it started to unravel for her. Fast. Viral line: "She built her kingdom on my land, and now her own people were turning against her." 10:15, 10:58 a.m. Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf. By the end of that week, Willow Creek didn't look so perfect anymore. The neatly trimmed lawns and shiny mailboxes couldn't hide the tension building between neighbors. People started whispering in driveways, holding late-night meetings without Linda. For the first time, they were realizing that everything, their houses, their fences, their dreams, sat on land that wasn't legally theirs. One morning, I walked past the new park they'd built right where my family's old barn used to stand. A few residents were there, talking in low voices. One of them, a young dad holding his kid's hand, came up to me and said quietly, "Sir, is it true? You really own all this?" I nodded. "Every inch." He looked down at his son and sighed. "She told us you were trying to steal from us. But now, I think she's the one who stole." That hit me harder than I expected. These weren't bad people, they were just fooled by someone who wanted control. Later that day, I got an envelope from a law firm representing several homeowners. They wanted to meet, without Linda. That's when I knew the tide had completely turned. But Linda wasn't the kind to give up. The next morning, she stormed onto my driveway again, this time with a clipboard, a new lawyer, and a TV reporter. "Mr. Hayes," she yelled, trying to sound confident. "You are illegally claiming WA land, and we will expose you publicly." The cameras were rolling. Perfect. I walked up slowly, calm as ever. "You sure you want to do this on record, Linda?" She glared at me. "Absolutely." So I reached into my truck and pulled out a rolled-up map, the county survey stamped just last week. I held it up to the camera. "This," I said, tapping the seal, "is from the county recorder's office. It shows who owns every parcel of this land." I pointed at the bold black outline. "See this? That's my property line. Everything inside it, all 42 acres, is legally mine." The reporter leaned in, surprised. "Ma'am, is that true?" Linda froze, eyes darting toward her lawyer, who was already backing away. We'll need to verify that," he muttered before slipping out of frame. The silence that followed was beautiful. For the first time, the world saw her power crumble live on camera. I looked straight into the lens and said, "I don't want their homes. I just want the truth out." That clip hit the news that night. Comments flooded in online, thousands of people calling her the WA queen who built on stolen land. But the best part came 2 days later when a letter arrived from the developer, the company that built Willow Creek. Short and simple: "We'd like to settle this quietly." Viral line: "She brought the cameras to expose me, and ended up exposing herself to the whole country." 10:58 a.m. Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf. The developer's letter was polite, too polite. They wanted a private conversation to resolve the misunderstanding. I'd seen that kind of language before. It meant they were scared. I agreed to meet, but not alone. I brought Sheriff Mike and my cousin Danny, who happened to be a land surveyor for the county. We met in a glass office downtown. The developer's representative, a slick man in a blue suit, greeted me with a forced smile. "Mr. Hayes, this is all just a paperwork mix-up," he said, hands folded. "We'd like to offer you a generous settlement to, let's say, clear the title." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean, to buy back the land you already built on?" He hesitated. "Well, in a sense, yes." Danny slid a folder across the table. "Before you talk numbers," he said, "you should see this." Inside were the county records. Turns out, the development company had used a copy of an old zoning map, one that didn't show the final property split from my grandfather's estate. They built 96 homes without ever verifying the updated title. In short, they built an entire neighborhood on someone else's land. "Mine." The man in the suit turned pale. "You mean, all of it?" I nodded. "Every square foot. Even your fancy clubhouse." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Mr. Hayes, we can make this right. Just tell us what you want." I leaned forward, calm but cold. "I don't want your money. I want the truth made public. And I want that woman, Linda, to stop threatening people who were never the problem." Sheriff Mike backed me up. "You better come clean before this turns criminal," he said. "Forgery, trespassing, fraud, you name it." The man swallowed hard. We'll issue a statement." And they did. The next day, every news station ran the headline. Developer built 96 homes on wrong property, retired sheriff owns entire neighborhood. Linda disappeared for a few days after that. WA meetings stopped. The community page went silent. But I knew she wasn't done yet. People like her never back down quietly. 3 nights later, I heard a car pull up outside my house. Headlights cut through the dark. A door slammed. Then a voice, hers. "You think you've won, don't you?" I stepped out onto the porch, the old deed folder still in my hand. I don't think, I said softly. I know. Viral line, they offered me millions to stay quiet, but my silence was never for sale. 10 quarters, 10:59 a.m. Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf. She stood at the end of my driveway under the dim porch light, her face half shadowed, hair a mess, eyes red. The confident Hoa president was gone. What stood there now was someone cornered. She gripped a folder in her hands and shouted, "You ruined everything. My home, my job, people hate me because of you." I stayed still. "You did that yourself, Linda." I just showed them the truth. She took a shaky step closer. "You think you're a hero? You embarrassed me in front of the whole country. Do you even know what it's like to lose everything?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Yeah, I do. I lost this land once because people like you thought they could take it. My family spent 40 years fighting for it back. So don't talk to me about losing everything." For a moment, she went silent. Then she threw the folder at my feet. "Fine, take your stupid land, but you'll regret this." She turned to leave, but headlights flashed down the road. A sheriff's cruiser. Mike stepped out, calm but firm. "Linda, we need to talk." She froze. "What now?" He held up a warrant. "We have evidence you filed false property claims and used fake law enforcement to intimidate a resident. That's criminal impersonation and fraud." Her face went white. "That's ridiculous." Save it for the judge," he said, reading her rights. She looked at me one last time, eyes full of fire and regret. "You planned this from the start." I shook my head. "No, Linda, you did." They led her away, her voice fading into the night as the cruiser door shut. The sound echoed across the quiet neighborhood, the same streets she used to rule like a queen. Neighbors came out one by one, watching silently. Nobody said a word, but I could feel it in the air, a mix of shock, relief, and justice. One of the residents, that same young dad from before, walked up to me. "You didn't just win a fight," he said softly. "You saved all of us from her." I nodded slowly. I just stood my ground. That's what this land is for. The next morning, news vans lined the street again. Headlines read, "Hoa president arrested after land fraud exposed." And for the first time, Willow Creek felt peaceful. Viral line, "She built her power on lies, and the truth tore it all down."